Mhm. Wait, one more. Mm. Well, the accusations about the 30th anniversary, Browns players trying to speak confidently going into this game. And to be fair, I don't think anything Grant Delpit said probably wasn't true today. Um, you have a defense that's playing extremely well, but part of the issue is how long can you hold up defensively if you are not getting the other phases of the game to play in with you? There's certainly definitely some positives to talk about and to take away from this today, and maybe things that would roll on, towards the you know full season of 2025. But at the end, it's a pretty difficult loss on the scoreboard to probably the class of the AFC North. Thanks for joining us all here. OBR Postgame Show. Jeff Lloyd, Pete Smith. Fred has already been called away to other duties, so I don't think he's going to join us. So, I mean, anybody that's followed me for a while and Pete for a while, I mean, post-game shows with Pete Smith and myself certainly aren't new to you. Pete, certainly a lot to unwrap. And, I don't want to sit here and try to act like I'm going to get like gushy over this loss. But as far as, what is this, the realism of what this team is and what this team is most likely going to be in 2026, you still kind of feel pretty good about that, other than the fact that you just, absolutely got boat raced in the second half.
Look, I mean, your team working on really thin margins, and you had a punt blocked. You gave away the ball for a touchdown. You gave away the ball to set them up for a touchdown. That's 21 points right off the rip. You're not going to win doing that the way the Browns are currently built. They have a lot of talent, but they don't have enough to cover some of the areas that are weakest. And they've got a couple weird dichotomy on offense where they've got a combination of very veteran players and super young players. So you're getting young mistakes out of a team with a 40-year-old quarterback, which isn't what anyone wants. But look, the defense continues to be really, really impressive. There are some plays that the Browns would like to have back, largely coverage busts. I would say right off the rip that Ronnie Hickman had a game he would like to forget in a couple of key areas. Joe Flacco looked like he did in 2023 against the Los Angeles Rams, where he looked like he was ready to, at points, was ready to be done and go home. I don't necessarily think that is sort of the end of him. I know there are plenty of people writing him off and saying this is sort of it. But if you go back and watch that game or remember that game, he literally looked the same thing, where he looked like he was like an old man moving around the pocket and taking some of those hits late in the game. Kevin Stefanski's already announced that they're not considering a change, which is smart. The last thing the Browns need to do is put a rookie out in front of the Green Bay Packers, who have a week and a half to prepare. But that conversation is going to pick up as we move forward. And, the issues that the Browns had coming into the season remain, though we did start to get some questions answered. The running game looks a little bit different when Quinshon Judkins is in the football game. That part is certainly encouraging, but there are a lot of other things that need to get better quickly, and the Browns need to either cause more teams to make mistakes or stop making their own if they want to win football games, particularly against this initial stretch. And this was the whole thing with why the Bengals game hurt so much to lose, because you knew you were going to turn around and play the Ravens and then the Packers. And then, it's not entirely clear what the Vikings are at this point, but they're talented. That slate is tough. They've got to find a way through it. I think they will, but it's going to be rough if you come out of this thing 1-5 to sort of be able to start talking yourself into anything.
I'll start, I guess, first because, I was one that was kind of adamant on the Quinshon Judkins thing. And you heard it mentioned during the broadcast. If Q had been an established veteran, nobody would have thought anything about it. Like, okay, he's free, he's good to go, da, 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 da. Me, it was just, I was thinking about the positive, the possible negatives, certainly, 3 months without activity. And yes, I understand he's working out, but it's a whole different landscape, of course, when you're away from the facility. Of course, this time of year, we don't get nearly the amount of practice coverage that we certainly do during training camp. So my guess is that, yeah, Q probably looked pretty darn good in those practices because, you certainly saw the juice was there. And it's not like he came in week 5 or week 6 where guys were a little bit tired already. He, comes in week 2 and certainly, sparked the running game to the fact that they actually, showed a lot better, I think, this week than they did last week. So, it looks like, for all intents and purposes, Judkins came out of this, certainly on the positive. So, that probably, makes you, the hesitation that we certainly had in regards to the running game when we sat here 1 week ago. I think I probably feel a little bit better about that now than I, did going into this. For me, it was just a personal preference. I just, I thought there was maybe, too many things that could possibly go wrong by putting Quinshon out there. But, hey, you certainly saw the effect that he's going to have. And you certainly saw, what the Browns obviously see in, putting that second round selection pick 36 overall on him. But we got to go to Joe. And Pete, I think the game you're referring to is the playoff game against the Texans, not the Rams, because that was his debut.
No. The Los Angeles Rams, 2023, they lost. He looked awful in the fourth quarter of that game, and he looked old. He looked ready to go. That's before they went on the run. I think it was his first game.
That was his first game.
Yes, and he looked like this. At the end of the game, it looked like this. The Houston Texans game was a different animal because of the pick sixes and everything else. No, it looked like the Rams game.
Now, with Joe, and like I see people commenting, throwing comments out there, and, in regards to the offensive line, Pete, I got to be honest, some of these things, where Joe's trying to maneuver around the pocket and either step up or roll out, I don't know that we can necessarily put this on the offensive line as much as we can say we've got a 40-year-old guy who just doesn't have a ton of mobility. And the one reason they're playing Joe is to not make that throw that resulted in the interception. The fumble, look, you can't necessarily control it, but the whole reason he's out there is to not throw that type of ball that led to the interception.
Right. So there's a whole lot going on here. One, the offensive line wasn't good. It wasn't bad either. It genuinely wasn't bad. But this highlights my concerns with taking quarterbacks who cannot move in the modern day NFL. So if you're a Nussmeier guy, this is the scenario that absolutely worries me. He's extraordinarily talented and has all these other things. And if we're talking about the year 2000, he looks like the first pick in the draft at points. But what you run into and what Joe Flacco sort of highlighted is when the opponent knows where you are, it becomes really easy to design pass rush against it because you just don't have a whole lot of options. And the state of offensive line play in the NFL versus pass rush play in the NFL is what it is. There's usually way more talent on the defensive side than there is on the offensive side. Having said that, the offensive line isn't what caused the problem here. What really caused the problem was the Browns receivers struggled to create separation all day. The Ravens did a really good job of covering them. Part of that was because the Ravens basically said to the Browns, look, we're going to drop back and you're not going to be able to take any deep shots. You're going to have to take underneath, and we're going to play tight coverage all the way through with protection over the top. And Joe Flacco was not effective in my mind at points with checkdowns. There were a couple Roquan Smith, his entire game was basically made by Joe Flacco decisions to me. There are multiple plays he threw behind the line of scrimmage to guys that were covered that Roquan Smith basically just said, okay, I'll tackle him and get a TFL, or I'll drop the ball on the ground and he can pick it up and run. It's not to take anything away from Roquan Smith. It just seemed like a lot of these run a platter for him. But that is what happened over the course of the game. The Browns' first drive, it looked like they were going to be able to take advantage of some of this stuff. And, Ross Tucker, who's a really good analyst, was basically talking about, look, if they're going to keep dropping like this, the Browns can just pick them apart underneath. Well, that didn't happen. They struggled to create separation. Part of this is, again, you have rookies. Like, coming out of this game, if you're talking about what you're excited about on offense, every single thing is a rookie. It's Quinshon Judkins having some production, including a big 31-yard run when it didn't really matter, but it's still good for him. Dylan Sampson did some stuff. Harold Fannin continues to be a pleasant surprise. Isaiah Bond is out there. He's not really making an impact, and he's not a punt return. He's just not. That part is awful, and Jeff Lloyd has to own the fact that he's been trying to kill DeAndre Carter, and it happened, and they had no one there. That's entirely on Jeff Lloyd.
Well, Jeff Lloyd was also the one that, I was also the one that said Isaiah Bond is not a returner in any way whatsoever. He's never been one.
You chastise DeAndre Carter, and they goes out with a concussion, and their return game is completely useless. Now, the Browns made some other decisions.
That hit was actually concussion on concussion. So the guy that hit Carter on that first kickoff, both of those guys left the game in concussion protocol. So
part of this, you look at this and you go, the rookies have to figure out how to play in the modern NFL and scramble drill and just getting open and doing these other things. The other part of that is you've got two guys that if you look at the stat sheet, you look at their production, you're like, and there were a couple plays they made. David Njoku and Jerry Jeudy have to be able to do more than they are currently doing. David Njoku had the one big play where the Ravens had a breakdown and it set up the field goal early, or not early, but their field goal. Jerry Jeudy had a couple nice plays, but his hands were inconsistent. and this is 2 weeks in a row. We're sitting here talking about his hands. He led the league in drops last year. He's got to be better, especially with the contract they're paying him. Njoku's got to be more of an impact player. In order for the Browns to be better, and they need to lead the way for these other guys, because Fannin and Sampson are going to continue to be parts of this offense. Quinshon Judkins is going to get a bigger role in the offense. Jerome Ford was basically what you'd expect from Jerome Ford. He was fine. But this is where they're at. And, Jamari Thrash finally got his first target of the season, and that was when Dylan Gabriel was in the game for garbage time. That's a little concerning as well. It goes to show you that the Browns, if you had sort of convinced yourself the Browns were good enough in terms of weapons, this should have ended that fantasy that they need to continue to add and keep building on this thing. But some of this is just getting better at it. The Ravens are a very veteran football team that has a whole lot of experience in terms of being a consistent playoff contender and all these other things. So that lack of experience showed itself to me in that element. So what, if you're asking, well, what has to happen to sort of fix this thing? Well, one, the run blocking, which was significantly better, even though it's still not good, still not where it needs to be, was significantly better from week one. That needs to continue. Quinshon Judkins, Dylan Sampson, Jerome Ford, whoever the hell else, if it's Raheem Sanders or whatever, need to be able to be more consistent on the ground. It was weird because the Browns seemingly ran the ball okay at times, but then sort of got away with it, or they had a penalty or something else. And then they need to do a better job. They need to do a better job in terms of getting their playmakers the ball and getting them to operate. To the question of to the super chat, which is greatly appreciated. Pete admits the rookies are the only thing worth watching on offense, so why not go on and play Dylan and Stewart out? Because the bottom line is, if one, you're about to play the Green Bay Packers, who to me look like the best team in football right this second. It's September, but they look like the best team in football in September. And you're talking about putting in rookies who Dylan Gabriel certainly looked reasonably competent preseason. Shedeur Sanders was completely lost in the third game of the preseason, needs a ton of work. If you rush these guys out and they are not ready, and you effectively throw them away now and they look terrible, then you're just going to basically count them out already. If the Browns are so impressed with Dylan Gabriel that he's good enough and they say we're going to roll with him, so be it. But I think Kevin Stefanski gave you a good indication that they are either not there yet, or they don't want to put them out against the opponent they're currently facing. So this is why Joe Flacco is here. As we talked about sort of last week with this, Joe Flacco, 40 years old, as frustrating as it is with some of the stuff he did today, he allows those guys to sort of showcase whatever ability they have. In other words, the same, Joe Flacco gets the ball 15 times combined to Sampson and Fannin. If a rookie is out there and they aren't seeing the field well, and they're doing rookie things that are struggling, and those guys don't get those looks, that is development you are not getting, and the whole offense potentially stalls out. Having said that, the one thing that Dylan Gabriel does add and could be a potential benefit to this offense is his mobility. Shedeur does not have that. So that is one thing that sort of works in
And Pete froze there just for a hair. But the thing with, and we talked about, certainly, and it was mentioned through the broadcast, certainly we've grown accustomed to, a lot of, boot action rollouts with whatever quarterback is playing for Coach Stefanski. You see that it struggles with Joe Flacco. We saw in a limited time over the summer that it does struggle as well with Shedeur Sanders. That is something you could necessarily do with Dylan Gabriel. But I do agree with Pete's point is, it's about, overall development. And, what, of course, Harold Fannin did last week, this week, Dylan Sampson, to a lesser degree this week, but certainly what he did last week as well. You want it to be going all around. If anybody peeked at maybe what the Jets did today, you don't want a 2 for 11 day from Dylan Gabriel. That does essentially nothing for anybody that may be getting Dylan Gabriel reps. And look, if you all wanted to say that Dylan Gabriel is the lead dog for 2026, then I'd say, yeah, all right, maybe we can halt a little development because we're trying to get the quarterback on pace. there still is, and it's been talked about since the schedule was released, how daunting the beginning of this Brown schedule is. And, if you thought today against the Ravens defense, where a guy like Kyle Van Noy was out of the game almost immediately, I don't even know if he actually played. You saw a little bit of Mike Green. Well, business is about to pick up next week when it's Micah Parsons. And, there's no other player on the level as far as pass rushers in the league to our Myles Garrett. But if you want to say Micah Parsons is absolutely knocking on that door screaming to let me in, I'm not going to argue with you. And you've seen just through last week, which was only a couple of practices, and then we all saw Thursday night, that all of a sudden everybody is now better because of a guy like Micah Parsons being there. Maybe it's getting closer. Maybe it's, still, maybe a month away from those conversations actually happening. But look, yes, Joe's mobility or lack thereof certainly is costing a lot of issues right now. And because it doesn't seem like really anything happens, secondary, or anything doesn't happen when the play breaks down, because it requires Joe stepping into the pocket, then obviously evading pass rush to the right, to the left. And at 40 years old, even though Joe is still a pretty decent athlete, when these guys are 22, 23 years old and absolute physical freaks, you're starting to see the issue there. But again, obviously, thank you, of course, for the contribution, through the super chat. Means a ton here too.
Look at the contrast between Joe Flacco having to try to get out and extend the play versus Lamar Jackson. Obviously, look, it's the ultimate ends of the spectrum. But the thing is, like, the Browns defense was fantastic, and there were times where Lamar Jackson just would not be beaten because he's just so athletic, because he can just extend the play long enough where he could ultimately find a guy open. And the Ravens receivers are so accustomed to being able to play, into the scramble drill and extend and everything else. You don't need to find a Lamar Jackson to be able to be successful, but having somebody who can do those type of things is just super valuable. And the Flacco version of events is just very limiting, because you feel like if it's not wide open, and granted he's 40, it looks even worse because of his age. But like, if you're talking about bringing in somebody who does similar things, that's where I get worried. Like, one of the things, I don't want to bash Shedeur Sanders, but like, one of the things I hated about watching him in college is he always thought he was more athletic than he is, and we get caught by all kinds of people doing stuff. So, so that becomes important. To the question of, again, thanks for the super chat, Buck. You said they're drafting a QB no matter what. So why do you care about rushing rookie QBs? You only feel backups anyway, because it's bigger than them. It's 53 guys that you have to do this thing. And if it feels like you're just jerking them around week 2 and week 3 of the season, then you're going to have a problem with the locker room. You are, that I don't look at this and say Kevin Stefanski is going to get fired by ownership. I think the risk he runs is getting fired by his locker room. And if the feeling within the locker room is they are just casting this thing in and basically moving on to 2026 with quarterbacks they feel are not ready, then that's what's going to happen. And they're going to fire them. The locker room is going to lose faith and fire them for reasons that, right this second look not great. The locker room is behind Joe Flacco and believes Joe Flacco can help them win football games. Until that changes, and maybe that will come here sooner than later, but until that happens, they absolutely cannot just throw guys in there and hope it gets better. That's going to make them look like they don't have a plan. Ross Tucker during the game talked about in the production meeting that they have everything scheduled down to the minute with Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. So they have something they want to do with this, and they're not going to just abandon ship for the sake of, well, we're not playing that well, so we're just going to throw stuff out there. And I don't want any team to operate with that mindset if we're just going to try stuff, because then it is amateur hour and you're not serious about what you're trying to do. You have a plan in place. If it's week 7 that you feel like you need to get there, so be it. When you face whatever, the Miami Dolphins, I think, is the team that's sitting there waiting for you, and they're terrible. I don't think the Pittsburgh Steelers are necessarily super ferocious, and they just lost Alex Highsmith to a high ankle sprain, which could put him on IR. But nevertheless, you don't want to just throw guys out there and potentially put yourself in a situation where, like, if you put Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders out there next week, it would be Gabriel, and they suddenly he gets Micah Parsons sacked, fumble, touchdown, or throws a pick six, and we're already sitting there going, well, the game's already over. Like, that's not good for anybody. So again, it's about, yes, the quarterbacks are their own thing, and the Browns want to take them seriously, even if they draft a quarterback. Because look, if the Browns draft a first-round quarterback, they will still have a first-round quarterback, Dylan Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders. And if they pick a quarterback, and right this second, this looks very plausible, they look like they could pick a quarterback who's not going to be ready to start in 2026. So if they do that, then either Dylan Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders, or somebody else is going to have to start next year. So they don't want to just throw this thing away and suggest that these guys aren't going to be viable ever. So they took swings, but they took swings on guys they want to take a look at and have real plans for. So they don't want to be there in week 3. Week 6, week 7, we'll see where we're at. Hopefully they will have won something by then and been able to sort of look at this thing and get it going. Because again, as bad as Joe Flacco looked in this game, again, he looked just as awful against the Rams in 2023, bounced back, and they went on a run. Can that happen against the Packers? Will be a very difficult task. But nevertheless, that is where this thing can potentially go, is if you go and get a win, especially if you can upset a team like the Packers, then you're going to feel like you're in a much better spot. So that's where they're at. The defense is fantastic. You don't want to just crap on those guys that we're just going to try stuff on offense and hope it works.
You just want to try to give off, some semblance, of normalcy. And look, let's be honest, it's 2 games, and none of us were having this conversation in regards to Joe Flacco's play, last week. And, look, what was one of the big things last week that was the issue was the 2 tipped interceptions. One of those was by Jerry Jeudy, which was part of 2 drops. I pretty much have Jerry Jeudy for another 2 drops today. There was one on his knees, it was a hook, should have caught it, didn't. The other one where he was fumbling and bumbling and stumbling with the ball, they said to review it, on the broadcast, which I thought made no sense whatsoever. I mean, he juggled the thing 12 times, I'm not sure if there was a time where he had control of the ball and actually had a foot down anyway. But, you need other guys to step up here. And certainly a guy like Jerry Jeudy, who's being paid like a number 1 wide receiver. And, that always comes down to how many number 1 wide receivers you think actually exist in the NFL. But he is the Cleveland Browns' number 1 wide receiver. So a lot of these guys, it comes down to making plays as well. We can't always just put the finger on everything else. I do want to thank Jerry. Look, honestly, it is a job for us. So this is what we do. But to hear kind words in those regards always, of course, mean a ton. So, this is all right, Buck. One more. What do you got for us?
Yeah. So
good.
Opening the door for Deshaun Watson. Listen, you have a better chance of playing quarterback for the Browns than Deshaun Watson does. I firmly believe that. Now, I could be dead wrong by the end of this, but look, if you put him in the game, you are basically everybody's gone. That is my firm belief that if Deshaun Watson sees the field again, everybody's going to get fired because he's such an energy vampire in terms of
nobody's signing off on
team, fan base, everything. That you at that point you are basically just saying we are resetting the whole thing. It was so bad last year in terms of what he was doing. You can blame a lot on the offense, which he wanted. You can blame a lot on the talent around him at points. Okay, but it looked like there were 9 players on the field at times, and he could not see anything, and he was disinterested. And the Browns knew it was going to be bad before the season even started. So yeah, I don't see that happening. So for now, it'll be Flacco. Eventually, we will. If things don't improve dramatically, we're going to see the other guys. But the flip side of that is most of these rookies most of these young players are going to continue to get better, but particularly the rookies. Quinjon Judkins should only get better from here. Dylan Sampson should only continue to get better. Harold Fannin should only continue to get better. That is a huge boost if you get better play, more consistent play from Jerry Jeudy, from David Njoku, from Cedric Tillman. But today they were not where they needed to be, and that needs to be improve dramatically and will be tough because the Packers have a really good defense. In addition to just the pass rush, they have really good corners as well. So the pressure is going to ramp up on those guys, particularly the bigger money guys.
And the thing, and I'll be honest with this, is, you see with Fannin, you see with Njoku, and certainly Dylan Sampson last week, that they were able to work really well, probably between the hash marks. Problem is they're not getting a lot working outside the hash marks, and certainly not getting anything going vertically, which is kind of what you would think, because if you're successful in that regard, eventually, if you keep putting together sustained drives and being able to get points, the opposing defense is going to have no choice but obviously to try to take that stuff away, which would lead to hopefully some shot plays. But if you can't stick around competitively enough, you're going to run in, certainly to those situations. I guess let's have a little fun now. Let's go to the defensive side of the ball. Pete, I would say first 30 minutes and change. Certainly the drive that stalled into a field goal for Baltimore after Nuke Hopkins caught it at basically the half-inch line. You see this defense and you see the excitement in them. You see the competitiveness in them. You see the one guy makes a play, the next guy wants to be the guy to make the next play. It was Miles and Cam Thomas that they split the sack, then came right back on the following play, which was a tackle for loss. And look, if you're keeping score as far as what was said about Derrick Henry, Browns absolutely took Derrick Henry out of this game today. Absolutely shut him down. And I think the thing is the Browns were confident that they knew if they could basically pressure the interior gaps, that's it for Derrick. Derrick just doesn't have the ability now to bounce out, so they literally just physically took him out of the game, and they, for the most part, took Lamar out of the game. I guess the 4 touchdown passes, 3 are on one corner. I guess he's part of the slot, and the other was on the other slot. But of course, some of these look like technique issues by the defensive back themselves. Kind of also maybe drew some questions about whether or not the safeties were supposed to have their backs. But the second Martin Emerson Jr. went down, Pete, one of the first things that every conversation began with was you really got to get some cornerback help in here. And the more you play when you're questionable, the more you inevitably end up getting exposed.
I guess. I mean, like, people are going to sit there and kill Cam Mitchell, and his leverage issues drive me nuts. He does things in terms of not seemingly playing to where his help is that genuinely frustrate me, or not playing to the appropriate leverage for the situation. But like the touchdown Miles Harden gave up, like, all right, yeah, I mean, that was on Ronnie Hickman. Based on his leverage, Miles Harden never had a chance. He was inside leverage. They rotated, or motioned over. He was
You'd have to be Ken
leverage.
Griffey Jr. to make up that angle.
Right. So that was never going to happen, and wasn't supposed to, because Ronnie Hickman was supposed to be over there. It was one of the issues he had, in addition to getting absolutely destroyed on that punt block. That part you're going to live with, especially in a world where Denzel Ward played 20 snaps. There's only so much you're going to be able to do if you're down. That now you're down Martin Emerson and Denzel Ward, and the Browns defense is still playing well. Eventually, you're going to get beat you're going to get up something. And what you kept running into was Lamar Jackson would drop back. The Browns would sort of send pressure. He was able to avoid it long enough to then find somebody who's open. That's almost an inevitability at points, because the Browns were really, really good for the entire first half. They were good through most of the third quarter, and then the fourth quarter, the wheels sort of fell off. But again, most of that was on turnovers and the other stuff. But in terms of like Mason Graham, really impressive with some of the stuff I saw from him. Malik Collins continues to be good. Myles Garrett was phenomenal. Isaiah McGuire, good. Devin Bush was outstanding.
No doubt about it.
He had a terrific game. Carson Swetzer continues to be fine. Jerome Ford was fine. He had 6 carries for 30 yards. It's a 5-yard average. He caught 5 balls for 23 yards and 6 targets. Like, that's fine. It's not great. It's not
I
like
think you
Jerome
guys.
Ford needs contract extension.
I think people are understanding when Pete says "fine." You know what I'm
That's
saying? Like,
fine.
would you like a drop of water to take your aspirin? Fine. When Pete says "fine," that's kind of
If you want to
the
get
equivalent to him. He did not say he was good. He did not say he played well. Said he was fine, which basically
11,
means
11
goes
touches for
past.
53 yards out of what is going to be your third string running back is fine, more than fine, whatever. But anyway, the front seven continues to be
Don't take
really, really
fine as
good.
Pete selling anything more than it is. Fine means
Uh,
you passed the class.
Grant Delpit was great.
Yep.
The goal line stand was outstanding. Like, there were so many times you just sit there and go, you just concede. You're just like, they're going to score. And the Browns absolutely, the Ravens didn't even try Derrick Henry there, basically gave up. I'm very curious to see if that's going to be a thing going forward. If we are now seeing, Derrick Henry's running on fumes at this point, or again, the Browns have look. When Grant Delpit said that, my immediate thought was, yeah, the Browns historically have crushed Derrick Henry. He's got one 100-yard game in 5 games. It was last year in December or January when the Browns were sort of cooked.
Week 18.
Whatever.
Week 18, exactly.
But that drive, they didn't even try it. They tried to play action. They tried to throw the ball. Devin Bush made a great play where he played the hands. Lamar Jackson put a perfect ball on Zaire Mitchell-Payton in terms of the one place it had to go, and Devin Bush was able to get it out. He put another ball in a good spot. Grant Delpit was able to punch that thing out. And then Myles Garrett with his sack was tremendous. It's a shame they go from that and then they can't do any. I mean, they did score a touchdown, but like it wasn't enough to sort of really get this thing going in terms of turning around. I mean, the damage was sort of done at that point in terms of what the offense is doing. Look, I was surprised at how much man coverage the Browns played in this game. I thought they'd play way more zone. It is intriguing to me that the Browns feel so good about their front between the defensive line, at times going into a true 50 front, at times going into a 6 with linebackers as sort of edge defenders, and saying, listen, we are going to keep Lamar Jackson in the pocket. We are going to be able to play man coverage. There are very few teams that do that against him and very few teams that have success with it when they try it. And that was really impressive. Greg Newsome was good, continues to be impressive. The touchdown he gave, again, we talk about the touchdown to DeAndre Hopkins. The 2 touchdowns he had, like both times the corner sort of tried to turn their head and play the ball at the exact worst time, but it's not like Hopkins had separated or anything. He literally just reached another foot outside of his frame to catch the ball. It's just outstanding. I mean, it's incredibly frustrating that it happens to the Browns in that situation, that you have corners in his hip pocket both times and he catches it, but that's why he's there. That is why the Ravens brought him in. That's why he signed there, to be able to make some of those plays. That stuff is incredibly frustrating. But Mark Andrews did he even catch a ball? Like one catch for 2 yards. The one guy that beyond DeAndre Hopkins, the one guy who's just legitimately really, really good in terms of just getting open and beating man coverage, Zay Flowers is tremendous. He is really impressive with his quickness and the elements that he brings to that game. So, yeah, people are going to kill Cam Mitchell. They've been doing it for a while. That's fine. You're at some point you're going to run out of corners when you don't have your best guys on the field. I am hoping that they continue to push the accelerator on Miles Harden. I really like what I see from him in terms of the way he competes, his size. I think he's going to get more and more reps. And the question is going to be how long. They messed with it a little bit today in terms of giving him a little bit of taste, but I'm curious to see how long it takes before they start. If it's 1 or 2 more games of Cam Mitchell in the event they need somebody else outside before they start maybe going to Jarek Bernard Converse, who had 5 snaps sort of at the end, because he's an outside corner. It seems like the reason you bring him in is in case of they have an issue like they did where a guy goes out and they want to be able to bring in another boundary guy. We'll see where that goes. But like I said, Ronnie Hickman, not a good game for him in terms of some of the adjustments they made. And some of it you give credit to the Ravens. Their coaches get paid too. They made a couple of nice calls that worked out well. But I think he had a game he would like to forget in terms of between special teams and some of the coverages that he needs to be responsible for. But having said all that, if you take all those things with the defense, you will sign up for that game every time in terms of what they were able to do and the sheer number of times the defense was able to give the offense a chance and the offense just spit the bit over and over again, or special teams did. Beyond the blocked punt, like I said, we both agreed, Isaiah Bond is not a punt returner. They hemorrhaged hidden yards from that standpoint. The Browns offense didn't take advantage of the Ravens kicking the ball out of bounds. Those are the things where you sit here and you get frustrated. So on the one hand, you sit there and you go, the Browns have what appears to be a great defense that is in place, is going to be in place for a while. Can they get the rest of this thing going enough? And can they do it now? That's going to be really difficult. Are there going to still be issues at times with corners, especially against a guy like Lamar Jackson? Yeah, Lamar Jackson is eventually going to find your weakness if you give him enough time. We'll see if that continues with Jordan Love. We'll see if that continues with a guy like J.J. McCarthy. But I suspect we're going to see more strong performances than not, especially given what the Browns did against Joe Burrow the week before, when everybody's sitting there going, the Browns have no corners, and then the corners play really well. And again, I thought Greg Newsome did well for the most part. I think he's justifying his status right now. And then just, thankfully, it seemingly with Denzel Ward was just cramps, and it's not a situation where we're looking to miss him, because my immediate thought was, oh, crap, the Packers are coming in. All they have is a million receivers, even if they're missing Jaden Reed to the collarbone. But, that is not a situation where you want to be down anybody.
Yeah, and, and just even, peeking ahead to next week, obviously the Packers are sitting here 2-0, confident as all can be, and, haven't done anything since about Thursday night at about 11:30. So way ahead, obviously, as far as getting the game plan in. A lot more guys coming back fresher to practice, for this game. Certainly a little bit of an advantage for the Browns that the game will certainly be played at home. Pete, we've done this now for a few years now. Probably one of the most underappreciated positional coaches in the entire NFL, Jason Tarver. The Browns just give him year in, year out, and there's been years where it's been better. Last year, JOK, of course, Jordan Hicks, or years in the past where it was BJ Goodson. You just basically tell Jason Tarver, this is your linebacker room, and year in, year out, whether there's money invested into it or there's money not invested into it, he finds a way to basically get the absolute best out of this linebacker room each and every year he's been here.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the assistant coaches and their ability to coach and develop players, he's number one with a bullet in terms of return on investment. Obviously, they used a second-round pick on JOK. He was great with Jason Tarver. Hopefully, he will be back. They used a second-round pick on Carson Schwarzenegger. He looks incredible right out of the gate. Devin Bush is playing the best football he's ever played. This game was probably his best football game ever.
Facet. He in every facet, getting after the quarterback, playing the run, playing the pass. Devin Bush, this is what people envisioned when he went number 10 overall.
Yeah, the thing is, I don't think I think the knee is still cooked. I think it's still a problem, but I think what Devin Bush has done is he's fixed it by he doesn't miss on angles, and he doesn't miss in technique. And the two plays he made in the end zone were perfect examples of that. He never tried to look back and just played the hands. He did exactly right. It took the exact angle to cut it off and try to obstruct the tight end's vision, and then just punched his hand out. That stuff was outstanding in terms of teach tape and everything you want. So from that standpoint, Devin Bush looks like a tremendous football player in terms of understanding how it has to go at that position with his issues. But Jerome Baker, not playing a ton of snaps, but is effective when he gets snaps. Mamu Diabate is still getting inserted into some small amount of snaps as he continues to work back from the quad, but they like what he can do. But Devin Bush is becoming, a conversation. And obviously, we've got to see what's going to happen with his however the league's going to come down with him at some point, whether he's going to be suspended or not. Seemingly he would be. But if, for as embarrassing as his situation was, and it made it look like the $3.25 million they guaranteed him looked like they were setting money on fire and probably wish they could have cut him once the arrest happened. Like, in terms of actual play on the field, he looks great. So that stuff combined with what you're getting from the defensive line is really working hand in hand. Devin Bush also had the sack. Isaiah McGuire sets it up. Devin Bush is coming from the right side of the formation, crosses all the way over because they've also sent Schlesinger up the middle, and he comes all the way back across and makes the sack. So really good stuff in terms of that. And it's going to help cover up some of the issues they have in the secondary when they have issues. But again, Lamar Jackson, that's what makes him so frustrating. And the combination of Lamar Jackson and those weapons, they will get you eventually if you cannot score points, if you cannot take advantage of your opportunities. And more importantly, I don't buy the idea that the Browns defense was gassed. I think they played 56 snaps. But I do buy that when your offense can't stay on the field, it's going to have an impact over the course of the game, just in terms of opportunities you're going to get. And eventually, the Ravens offense is going to get enough looks at this thing where they can find something they're going to be able to do.
The most impressive thing, in my opinion, about Devin Bush with what was credited as the sack, and rightfully so, on Lamar is so many people go at Lamar for the kill shot. And that's kind of where you get taken out. Like, Devin Bush basically just did what you were taught, your first tackle practice as a kid. Break down, get yourself in a good tackling position, and just when the physicality gets near you, go ahead and get into it. And, obviously Devin Bush, son of a player, certainly in, long, storied, history as far as, his high school days, his Michigan days. And certainly not unfamiliar to, competing against Lamar Jackson. But this linebacker group is just, they're really just fun to watch. And it's really been one thing for me, over the last, numerous years now, where it's just whoever it is, they get the absolute best out of that room. And, you can have the conversation any way you want it. It's there's times where I think, it's been a position, and I know, Pete, we've had these conversations a million times, where maybe it's a dying position as far as relevancy in football. But if you want to be a team that just attacks and gets to 2nd and 12, and, then does kind of have, some importance to it. But this group, they play hard, they play consistent each and every week. There's just, no question about it. We haven't really gotten into this name today, and I had no issues with what he did last week, but I think you saw Mason Graham take week 1 and maybe whatever he felt maybe was, a learning experience, or maybe Mason Graham seemed to be penetrating a lot more today. And when he got his hands on it, it was over today, including if it was the 250-pound Derrick Henry.
Yeah, he blew up a couple of plays early in the game, and there was one, I think, in the third or fourth quarter, where he chased down the line in pursuit, and you saw, he
tapped and actually tapped right out afterwards. He was aghast.
Yeah, he after they drafted him, he immediately started changing his body composition and lost a bunch of weight, and he's playing light. And they seemingly just want him to gain strength relative to the 290-ish, probably 295 at this point, pounds he weighs, and just adding to it. But, and you think to yourself, well, that's light. And there are times where it looks light. When the Ravens go 4th and 1 and the Browns sort of get pushed, it looks light. But because he's able to attack so often, 1, he looks faster and more explosive, and 2, he looks more powerful because he's able to generate so much momentum. So it was very encouraging to see him look good in his second game ever. I just think it's going to continue to get better and better and better. He and Carson Schlesinger have been tremendous up the middle. And again, on a pretty young defense by and large, they've got staying power, and they've got to stay healthy. They've got to avoid getting bit by injuries and stuff like that. But it went from a group that was so, particularly up front, reliant on veterans sprinkling in some young guys, to now It's largely young guys with a very light sprinkling of veterans like Shelby Harris and Joe Tryon, who still seems to be DE5.
Yep.
They, but the rest of those guys on that group, and Myles Garrett, obviously, who's still, he looks like he's on pace for his best year ever, in terms of play-to-play ability. And some of this is because the Browns are able to. He's playing a lot of snaps, but they are spacing out the how he's getting them. They can rotate more guys and feel more comfortable taking him off the field. You're seeing guys like Cam Thomas, who helped on the one sack, which is a really nice rush where he was able to chase around the backside and split it. Aiden Huntington, all these young guys are able to get in there. Isaiah McGuire continues to be tremendous.
Yep.
Alex Wright continues to frustrate me, not because he's bad, but just because I want more from him. And I think it's in there, and we just need to, I think there's going to be a game where all of a sudden maybe that we're going to get the Alex Wright game where he has a bunch of big plays. Just haven't gotten there yet. But, I think next week's going to be the week we're going to get Mike Hall back. It seemed like the Browns wanted him to get 2 full weeks of practice, and then they scheduled the day off on Friday before ruling him out. It wasn't because of an injury, it was because they just weren't going to play him. I think he's going to be back for the Packers, which is great. But the fact is they were able to be comfortable waiting because they have enough guys in there, because they have Malik Collins, because they have Shelby Harris, because they have Aiden Huntington, that it didn't feel like they needed to rush. So hopefully they feel really good about him when they bring him back, and he can bring even more juice on the inside as a pass rusher and more explosion. So, you look at a game like this one where there were times where Lamar Jackson is just able to get back far enough where he can outreach. You go back to last year when Hall, before he got hurt, played the Ravens. He was chasing Lamar all over the field and giving Lamar fits. So hopefully that element can come back, especially against a guy like Jordan Love, who likes to drift back in the pocket and do those types of things. So, it's more defense, which, the Browns have plenty of right now. In addition to a few spots, they're going to continue to evolve. But, obviously the big question is, one, can the special teams get right? Because we're going to hear a lot more pressure, although at least this week, Schmidt didn't miss anything.
And I think you have to, and the thing though is you have to give Schmidt the credit here because it's on the road. And who knows, maybe some way for a kicker, it might actually be a little bit easier on the road because you feel like, well, I should probably get booed anyway. But, look, both his kicks, obviously, solid, took care of, 3 kicks, took care of his business today. Obviously, everything he had to do. So a feel-good moment. And, for everybody, look, you can't run a kicker out of town after one game. If you do that,
I just wouldn't do it.
Well, you can, but these 5 guys that go around week to week that do their kicking auditions in every city, they're not going to come to Cleveland. Because I'm not going to come, because God forbid I miss a 43-yarder. I'm not going to come even work out if there's a good chance that you're just going to kick me out the door after, one game anyway whatsoever. But, look, if you're young everywhere else, maybe it's not the worst time in the world to be possibly grooming a young kicker as well. You know what I'm saying? So
he's a rookie. I mean, it's if they figure this whole thing out, it's one more rookie that can do the job. So
you got it.
There's another benefit to it. Now, I'm not going to sit here and go pound the table and say Andre Schmidt's that guy, but at least he didn't screw it up today. Not that it mattered in terms of pressure or anything, but nobody's talking about that element in this one.
Yeah, and look, I mean, there were a couple times, maybe they're not going to try the 50. No, they probably weren't going to try the 50-yard with it. And when they were down 17, hey, can you make a 52-yarder here to cut it to 14? No, I mean, but look, the kid made the kicks he had to make today. You roll on. Hopefully, you go from there and you see where you're at next week. The one thing we can probably tell you at this point through 2 games is, yes, kicker was the problem in week 1. But, if this team can't pick up the overall play of the offense and the special teams collectively in other aspects, what exactly the kicker does is probably not going to mean too much. Pete, obviously we're waiting to hear DeAndre Carter, obviously concussion. I do have, I'm hoping it is because Denzel Ward was back out there, as far as I can tell, for a brief bit in the second half.
Came back in, then went back out, but allegedly was still for the same issue, which was cramping all day, according to Kevin Stefanski.
Well, I mean, cramping could also be code for not feeling well. Cramping could be code
could be
for,
sick.
could have been food poisoning, could have been sick. I mean, there could have been a million other things. Look, it's a hell of a lot better, certainly, than what we've dealt with. Obviously, Denzel, unfortunately, a bunch of injuries during his career. Barack was, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit nervous. Because I think a lot of people get confused. The plant foot's you, you need
More
it. I mean,
important.
basically, exactly. I mean, all your body weight is going on your plant foot, and I think he gutted his way through it. You could certainly tell they did something though, because when he came out, you could see there was a lot more chunk on that ankle, unless it just swelled up that fast. Who the hell knows? But made his way through it. Um, but injury wise, I think again, it looks like you're in a good spot. It was certainly weird with the Conklin thing that it didn't come out until late in the week, that there was also an elbow in addition to the eye. But that being said, I don't really think Cornelius Lucas really disappointed today. The only problem is when you have Jones and you have Cornelius Lucas on the field at the same time playing the bookend tackles, Pete, it passes the get off the bus test. But both these guys essentially have the same issue as offensive tackles. You think they can be adequate enough as pass blockers, but due to their overall size, it absolutely hamstrings both of them as far as, getting to where they need to be in run blocking.
I mean, KT Levinston is at least better as a run blocker, but DeJuan Jones was better in this one. Like, he was better. I think he's always going to have some issues because he's, it's an agility thing. It's not easy for him to get to like the second level and cut off linebackers. But I don't care. But I don't care as long as he's an excellent pass protector, because I can figure it out with the other four guys. Now, having said that, they've got a lot of issues to ultimately replace with the other four guys. And that's just because they are getting to a point where you're going to have that conversation. Like, the beyond the two positions I'm looking at in terms of like college games, like, the first two are quarterback and tackle and offensive line in general, because they're going to have to do a variety of changes on this thing just to get younger. So I don't worry that much about it. But my only thing with DeJuan Jones really comes down to, I just want to see continued improvement from week to week to week. Now, having said that, it's really frustrating. Not because I sit here and complain that Cornelius Lucas is playing. I think Cornelius Lucas is fine. It's just Jack Conklin is a more impactful run blocker. Cornelius Lucas actually did a fine job with it. It's just, one, it's all of your depth is already gone at that point when you have to put Lucas into the game, because KT Levinston is your next guy, and he's not a very good pass protector to this point. It's not to say he can't get better. It's just that's where he is right this second. But I want to see what this thing looks like with Jack Conklin for more than one series in this season. Because if the Browns do find themselves in a situation where they need to keep one of these guys longer, Jack Conklin might make sense to hold on for another year. But it's an issue that's got to get better. The thing that you run into, and the Browns, I applaud the Browns for what they're getting out of this rookie class. Like, it's genuinely really impressive how many guys are playing well, but none of those guys are linemen. And that was the thing that everybody sort of saw coming. And it's still sitting there making you wonder how this thing's going to work. And it's week 2. And again, they're healthy for the most part, other than Conklin. He should be back hopefully this week, but it's, that's going to be one of the big priorities for them this offseason. The only saving grace in this whole thing is that, for whatever issues people have with the quarterback class early in this college season, the offensive line class is really good. And there are no shortage of guys that stand out that can really come in and help a team get better. And particularly for the way the Browns want to play, I think they're going to be more than happy with that. I think they're going to be happy to have Mike Bloomgren as part of that operation to help them get the guys that they want. But yeah, I mean, that's for all the things you like about what the offense can be, so many of them start with, they got to do a way better job up front and not just be passable, or we're not losing because of them. They've got to get to a point where they are now winning because of them. And I don't know that that's in the cards this season, or at least we haven't seen it yet.
And look, I mean, it's going to be in. Look, anybody who listens to me on a daily basis, like this was, you were hoping you're not replacing all five. That was at least the hope for this year. But the realism of is that you're possibly replacing four, which, yeah, it's a little better than replacing all five.
Yes, with the caveat of one might be already on the roster
Center.
in Whippler,
Okay.
and
I agree.
which one is very important because look, like for example, every so often some people will tell me about Connor Lew from Auburn, and yes, he's very, very good, but I don't want to draft a center in the first round. And two, I want a guy who will have a whole lot of reps and understanding in the offense they're going to run. By all accounts, Luke
He's got to
Whippler is
make the
very
calls.
smart.
If he's got to
He's
basically walk
very
in and be the
smart,
captain, of course.
understands what this thing needs to be. Like, I'm hoping he can progress and be a very good starting caliber center. Now he's got to prove that, but at least in the preseason, stood out every time he was out there. Obviously, not to a point where he's ready to take over for Ethan Posick, which is where I have a little bit of concern. But again, if they feel like they need to keep one of these guys for another year, I understand. But yes, ultimately, you are going to need a whole lot of guys. They trade for KT Leviston. That, to me, is a swing. That's not a plan. Zach Center, it's by the end of the year, he's going to have to prove something to be anything more than some long-term depth piece. Those are the things where you sit here and you look at this thing and you go, okay, well, where are the rest of these guys going to come? And it seems like maybe, I don't really buy free agency as an option, but the draft is going to have a lot of guys. So, that will be certainly one of the things where as this season moves on, we're going to be seeing where the draft picks are sort of heading, and two, where the college classes are sort of heading. Unfortunately, today, the Jaguars snatched defeat from the jaws of victory against the Cincinnati Bengals and helped the Browns from that standpoint. And coming out of that game, once again, the Jaguars have a ton of questions if they're actually going to be any good. So obviously, the Browns want to win football games. They're not tanking by any stretch. But it is what it is when you're 0-2, and you could easily paint a scenario they're 1-5. You're going to have a high pick unless they go on a scorching tear in the second half of the season, and then you hope the Jacksonville Jaguars suck because you have their pick. And if you can get two picks and trade one down or whatever to just continue to build on this talent, if you can have another draft that you feel really good about like this one, then suddenly they're cooking. And obviously quarterback and offensive line are going to be the two things that we're going to be focused on more than anything else.
And look, it's not like they won't show the ability. I mean, one of the first moves this regime made right out the gate was obviously signing Jack Conklin back in those days. Leading, I guess, so that would have been March of 2020. And just in case, Pete, to this point, I just want to make sure I get this right when I give it to this point. We currently have Browns rookie. Hold on, wait a minute. Here we go. Harold Fenton is over 100 yards career receiving in the NFL to this point.
Yeah, really.
And number two, the guy who went number 2 overall is nowhere near that number. But go ahead.
Well, that part's I'm not going to say I have watched really anything from Travis Hunter, so I have no idea what he's doing. I've seen the stats; they aren't very pretty.
They are literally using him like a third wide receiver and a third corner. But go ahead.
But what stands out to me that's really interesting with the Harold Fenton thing is like Isaiah Likely is a really good football player for the Baltimore Ravens. His career high in a season is like 460.
When they put that up to like I'll be honest with you, I think it was 42 for you're right, 460, maybe 470 and 6 touchdowns last year. I was like, was that like the first half? Because it totally felt like, wow. I thought, because then you see the numbers that are being floated around for like I'm like, that was it. That is all Isaiah Likely did last year, because it certainly felt like a hell of a lot more.
Right. So but that's the impact it has. So it's like magnified. I would say the same thing about Harold Fenton. Now the Browns need more from their other guys for it to matter. But like Isaiah Likely is a force multiplier. He makes everybody around him better when you have dudes who make plays. And you saw that in week 1. Harold Fannin was a force multiplier in terms of the rest of the offense. If he can be that and the Browns get better play out of that group, that's going to be really interesting. But yes, to this point, Dylan Sampson and Harold Fannin both have more receiving yardage than Travis Hunter, and that's whatever that may or may not be meaningful. But what I do think is meaningful to this point is right now that Mason Graham is playing better football than Travis Hunter to this point, and that is sort of an look. The idea that the Browns wouldn't have taken this trade if they didn't need a quarterback is utterly insanity. That was a cognitive test. If the Browns didn't take that trade based on what was being offered, they failed. So to then get what we saw from Quinshon Judkins, and it's obviously that's got to keep coming. You've got what you've seen from Mason Graham at this point, which is really promising. You've still got the pick next year, and the Jags are, we'll see. Travis Hunter, look, I think it's reasonable to expect that there would be a somewhat of a slow burn, but because you have Brian Thomas, because you have some of these other guys, like this was supposed to be somewhat of a reasonably smooth transition for him to come in and be a dude. Like for the Browns, had they taken Travis Hunter, you had Jerry Jeudy, but like Travis Hunter was going to be like looked at as sort of the guy. Brian Thomas Jr. is clearly
the guy.
based on last year was tremendous, and came in looking like a true number one receiver. So to get Travis Hunter, it seemed like this was a luxury that was going to take your offense to another level. To this point, that is not happening, and maybe the dynamics that he creates are not unlike Harold Fannin, where he's a force multiplier, where having to deal with him makes everybody else better. But you gave up a lot for him, and at least through 2 games, it doesn't look like you're getting the return on investment. Now, maybe week 3 is where it takes off, or they've got the Houston Texans followed by the San Francisco 49ers. We'll see if it gets better. But looking at this right now, the Browns have to feel pretty good about everything they've gotten out of this deal.
You've got Mason Graham, you've got Quinshon Judkins. If you were going to say the question right now today, most likely their own pick will lead to the quarterback that is drafted next year. But then Jacksonville's could be the offensive lineman. I know you guys love Caleb Downs, guys. There's not a way in the world.
No.
There's not a way in the world.
Unless he's playing receiver.
Exactly. The Cleveland Browns will never value that position that high. No knock on Caleb.
It's not even that. Like Grant Delpit's valued plenty, but like they can't take another one.
Exactly. No, exactly.
They'll trade down and get another bounty.
Exactly. So I know you guys love the Columbus to Cleveland connection.
He's tremendous. He's unbelievably good at football.
Yes.
100%. Unfortunately, I watch the Browns offense and it's really bad and they need more dudes. So
and he doesn't score touchdowns.
In order for that to be a possibility, they need a whole lot of things to go their way between trades, free agency, and just development.
Or the other one would be the freakish linebacker with the pursuit angles from Ohio State. If JOK is not healthy, might be somebody.
Stop it. No, we're not doing Arvell Reese either. He's good. Again, he's good. He's good.
Oh, absolutely.
You just got him. His name is Carson Schwarzenegger. You got that guy.
100%. You're absolutely right. Look, obviously a disappointing day. Because I think I think we were all kind of into it as far as, the 30th anniversary, and they found a way late in the game to say, oh, well, it was going to be scheduled week 1. And you knew it was kind of a flub because I don't know if it was Ross Tucker, the play-by-play guy. Before they found out Cleveland was on the schedule, it was like before they found out Cleveland was always on the schedule. Cleveland was going to be on the schedule as a home game, guys. So they flubbed over it. So obviously everyone was hoping for a better showing. I think for the most part, one of my things was, hey, if you're going to talk a little bit, you better back it up a little bit. And, I'd say for 35 minutes, I think they did. And, we've certainly seen this before from the defense. When it feels like you are carrying the entire load, eventually the load gets extremely heavy. And, if you're setting the offense up and then you get back on the field and you look up at that scoreboard and that scoreboard is exactly the same as it was when you left the field the last time, then the pressure kind of picks up a little bit more. We got to do it again. And, maybe this time, hopefully we can get a turnover. And look, and I think a lot of people's feelings on this Browns team right now, I think, are based on what you actually thought this team would be this year and whether or not you were somebody whose vision was maybe more towards 2026 and whatever maybe happened this year would essentially, be gravy. But appreciate you all. Of course, ton of content coming through on the OBR.com, all the written content. So make sure you're checking all of that out as well. We'll tee it up for another week here. I know you guys, I heard and I got a lot of messages about the Gang of Three from last Monday night. It's always nice to get Lane out, and we are always ones to push him. Because we know how much you guys appreciate him. We appreciate him around. We would, if we can get Lane to do more, we would always get Lane to do more. So I think that was kind of a nice, little shove out of the nest to get him. And I think he kind of enjoyed himself as well. Have Pete and Joe on Tuesday nights, which is, something that people are really starting to look forward to. Again, we'll see where it's at. Each week is going to, and who knows, we could sit here next week and maybe this team plays extremely well against Green Bay. And, maybe everybody's thoughts are changed a little bit, but, this 2025 is certainly something I don't think that everybody necessarily has the answers just yet. Pete, any final thoughts before we put a bow on this?
Just it sucks to lose. The score is not really indicative of how this team performed.
It's two division games, so that's always going to hurt a little more, no doubt.
But the fact of the matter is, like, as much as I can say, hey, the offense has a bunch of really good really good looking rookies. The defense is dynamic and really fun to watch. It only goes so far. They have to win games to make this thing work. They can't, you can only talk about how fun and interesting this thing is for so long before you have to start getting results that it's not. Even as much as it is for the fans and getting them to sort of understand where this thing is trying to go, it's for the guys in the locker room. They need to see it working. They need to see that, that payoff. Myles Garrett talked about it in his press conference that he doesn't see anybody that losing confidence or anything like that, which is important. But like that shouldn't be, that's not where I want this team to be talking about in terms of we're 2 weeks into a 17-game season. They need to start finding a way. In the past, look, say what you will about Kevin Stefanski. There are people who don't like him. Every so often, he comes up big against a team that the Browns are expected to get drilled by, whether it was the San Francisco 49ers at home, whether it's been the Baltimore Ravens on the road in the past. Obviously, not so much today. And there have been moments where the Browns have come up huge and taken a game. They need one of those to happen to get this thing going. They need the offense to get better and start figuring some stuff out because they cannot keep just talking about, or we can't be in a position where we're trying to tell people, hey, hang in there, this thing's going to go well, even if I believe that, which I do, but like while the losses continue to pile up.
Yep. The takeaway from 2 weeks is youth is king. Youth is good. That's, it's unfortunately just not enough yet. And they don't necessarily have the youth in the most important position of all of professional sports. But obviously everybody contributed through Super Chat, everybody that was here, always, greatly appreciated. Again, everything will be coming through the OBR this week, of course, and of course the OBR streaming network. So, everybody make sure you stick around for that. Otherwise, it's mid-September. We are in full-on football mode. I hate that some of you guys get so aggravated by this because we only got 16 more of these. As far as, well, hopefully, as far as, more would be nice, but maybe only 16 more of these as far as the Browns are concerned. Enjoy it. Best time of the year. There is nothing better. For me, I will see you guys all tomorrow. People see you guys tomorrow night as well and Tuesday night. Appreciate the support. And, as always, let's go Browns.